The Duke of Ashworth stood at the edge of the ballroom like a hunter watching his prey. His dark eyes never left the woman in emerald silk who danced with Lord Peterson. 10 years, 10 long years, he had waited for this exact moment. Tonight, she would dance with him. Tonight, everything would change. Eleanor Hartwell spun gracefully in Peterson's arms, her auburn hair catching the candlelight. She had no idea that across the crowded room, the most powerful man in England watched her every move. She had no idea that he remembered everything about her, the way she laughed, the way she moved, the way she had broken his heart. The waltz ended. Eleanor curtsied to her partner and stepped away from the dance floor. Her cheeks were flushed pink from dancing. Her green eyes sparkled with joy. She looked exactly as she had 10 years ago, when she was just 18 and he was a foolish young man who thought love conquered all. "Your Grace." His secretary appeared at his elbow. "The Marquess of Dover wishes to speak with you about the shipping contracts." "Not now," Marcus said, without taking his eyes off Eleanor. She was talking to Lady Pemberton now, smiling and nodding at something the older woman said. He could see her profile, the elegant line of her neck, the way she held her gloved hands. "But Your Grace," he says, "it is urgent." "I said not now." Marcus's voice carried the authority of a man used to being obeyed. His secretary bowed and melted back into the crowd. Marcus straightened his black evening coat and checked his white gloves. He had practiced this moment in his mind 1,000 times. What he would say, how he would approach her, what excuse he would give for asking her to dance. The truth was too dangerous. The truth would send her running from the ballroom. He moved through the crowd like a ship cutting through calm water. People stepped aside without thinking. They always did. Power had that effect. The Duke of Ashworth could buy and sell half the men in this room. He controlled shipping routes, owned coal mines, had the ear of the Prime Minister, but none of that mattered now. All that mattered was reaching the woman in emerald silk. Eleanor saw him coming. Her smile faltered for just a moment. Her hand moved to her throat in a gesture he remembered well. She was nervous. Good. She should be. "Lady Hartwell." He stopped in front of her and bowed perfectly. "How lovely to see you this evening, Your Grace." She curtsied, her eyes not quite meeting his. "What a surprise to find you at Lady Whitmore's ball. I heard you rarely attend such gatherings." "I make exceptions for special occasions." He kept his voice light, casual, as if seeing her again meant nothing to him, as if his heart was not pounding against his ribs like a caged bird. Lady Pemberton looked between them with sharp interest. The old woman loved gossip more than she loved her morning chocolate. "Your Grace, you must know our dear Eleanor has just returned from Paris. She has been studying art there for the past year." "How fascinating." Marcus never took his eyes off Eleanor's face. "And what brought you back to London?" "Family obligations." Eleanor's voice was steady, but he could see the pulse beating fast at her throat. "My father needed me at home." The orchestra began tuning their instruments for the next set. Marcus heard the familiar notes of a waltz beginning. This was it. This was the moment he had waited 10 years to claim. "Lady Hartwell," he said, extending his hand, "would you do me the honor of dancing with me?" Eleanor stared at his outstretched hand. He could see the war playing out in her green eyes. Part of her wanted to refuse. Part of her was curious. Part of her, he hoped, remembered what they had once meant to each other. She hesitated. Around them, the ballroom noise faded to a whisper. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. "Just one dance," he said softly. "Surely you can spare me that much." Lady Pemberton nudged Eleanor's elbow. My dear, one does not refuse a duke, especially not when he asks so nicely. Eleanor looked up at Marcus then, really looked at him. He saw recognition flash in her eyes, not just of who he was now, but of who he had been. The young man who had loved her so desperately, the young man she had left without a word. "Very well," she said finally. "One dance." She placed her gloved hand in his. The touch shot through him like lightning. Even through the silk of her gloves, even after all these years, her touch still made his breath catch. He led her onto the dance floor as the waltz began in earnest. They took their positions. His right hand rested at her waist. Her left hand sat lightly on his shoulder. Their other hands joined in the classic pose. For a moment they simply stood there, looking at each other across the small space between them. "You have not changed," he said, as they began to move to the music. "Neither have you." Her voice was barely audible over the orchestra. "You are still the most arrogant man I have ever met." He smiled at that, the first real smile he had worn all evening. "And you are still the most beautiful woman in any room you enter." They spun across the polished floor with perfect grace. Marcus had always been an excellent dancer, but with Eleanor in his arms, he felt like he could float. She followed his lead as if they had been dancing together every day for the past 10 years, instead of being separated by an ocean of hurt and silence. "Why did you ask me to dance?" she said as he guided her through a turn. "Because I wanted to." The honest answer slipped out before he could stop it. "That is not a reason. That is a desire. Perhaps they are the same thing." Eleanor's cheeks flushed deeper pink. "You speak as if 10 years have not passed, as if nothing has changed. Has it?" He pulled her slightly closer as they moved through the steps. "Have you changed so very much, Eleanor?" The sound of her name on his lips made her stumble slightly. He caught her, steadied her, never missing a beat of the music. "You cannot call me that," she whispered. "Not here, not now. What should I call you then?" Lady Hartwell seemed so formal for two people who once knew each other well. "We knew each other when we were children. We are not children anymore." "No," he agreed, his dark eyes intense. "We are not." The waltz carried them around the room. Marcus was dimly aware of other couples dancing nearby, of the watching eyes of London society, but all his attention was focused on the woman in his arms. She smelled of roses, and something else, something uniquely Eleanor that had haunted his dreams for a decade. "You went to Paris," he said. "Yes. Did you like it there?" "Very much." She was looking over his shoulder now, not meeting his eyes. "The art, the culture, the freedom to be myself without everyone watching and judging. Everyone, or just me?" That made her look at him again. "You flatter yourself, Your Grace. I have not thought of you in years." "Liar." The word was soft, almost gentle. "How dare you?" "You are thinking of me now," he interrupted. "I can see it in your eyes. You are remembering." Eleanor's lips pressed together in a thin line. "I am remembering why I left."
"Are you?" "Because I remember that day, very clearly. I remember waiting for you in the garden. I remember the letter your maid brought, instead of you. I remember every word you wrote."
The music swelled around them. Other couples laughed and chatted as they danced, but Marcus and Eleanor moved in their own private world of tension and memory. "That was a long time ago," Eleanor said finally. 10 years, 3 months, and 16 days, Marcus replied without hesitation. Eleanor's eyes widened. "You counted." "Every single one." They danced in silence for a moment. Marcus could feel Eleanor's guard starting to crack. The walls she had built around her heart were not as strong as she pretended. He could work with that. He had learned patience in the past 10 years. He had learned how to wait for what he wanted. "Why are you here tonight?" Eleanor asked suddenly. Really? You hate these kinds of parties. You always did. Perhaps I have changed. No, you are exactly the same. Determined, focused, used to getting your way. So why are you here? Marcus considered lying. It would be easier, safer. But he had lied to himself for 10 years about being over her, about not caring what had happened to her, about not watching for news of her return to London. He was tired of lies. Because I heard you were back, he said simply. Eleanor missed a step again. This time she recovered on her own. That is impossible. Is it? I have friends everywhere, Eleanor. Friends who know what interests me. And I interest you. Her voice was carefully neutral. You have always interested me. Even when I tried to forget you. Even when I told myself I hated you for leaving. Even when I married another woman because I could not have you. The color drained from Eleanor's face. You married? I was married. My wife died 3 years ago. I am sorry for your loss. Marcus nodded. She was a good woman. She deserved better than a husband who could never love her the way she deserved. Marcus. Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. You should not say such things. Should I not? We are having one dance, Eleanor. One dance that I have waited 10 years for. I think that earns me the right to speak honestly. The waltz was ending. Around them, couples were beginning to bow and curtsy to each other, preparing to leave the dance floor. But Marcus did not release Eleanor's hand. The music has stopped, she said. Has it? I had not noticed. People are staring. Let them stare. Eleanor pulled her hand free of his grasp. Thank you for the dance, Your Grace. It was pleasant, pleasant. The word hit him like a slap. 10 years of longing, of dreaming of holding her again, and she called it pleasant. Was it? He said coolly. How disappointing. I was hoping for something more memorable. Eleanor's cheeks flushed. What did you expect? We are not the same people we were 10 years ago. Are we not? Marcus stepped closer to her, close enough that only she could hear his words. Because my heart is beating exactly the way it did when I was 25 and foolish enough to believe in fairy tales. Fairy tales end, Marcus. They always end. Some do. But the best ones, the ones worth telling, those have second chances. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the battle between what she wanted and what she thought was safe. I cannot, she said finally. I will not do this again. She turned to leave, but Marcus caught her wrist gently. Eleanor, wait. No, she pulled free again. Thank you for the dance, Your Grace. Please do not ask again. She walked away from him then, her emerald skirts swishing with each step. Marcus watched her go, noting the straight line of her spine, the proud tilt of her head. She was running from him again, just as she had 10 years ago, but this time he would not let her disappear so easily. Marcus made his way to the edge of the ballroom, accepting congratulations and small talk from various lords and ladies who wanted his attention, but his mind was entirely focused on Eleanor. She stood near the refreshment table now, talking to a group of young women. She was smiling, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. Quite a performance, Ashworth. Marcus turned to find Lord Pemberton beside him, the husband of the gossipy lady who had been talking to Eleanor earlier. I beg your pardon? Dancing with Lady Hartwell. Half the room is talking about it already. They say you have never danced with an unmarried lady at a social event. Not once in the 3 years since your wife died. Marcus said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence was often the best response to unwanted observations. Of course, Pemberton continued, Lady Hartwell is not exactly a typical unmarried lady, is she? 28 years old, No husband, living independently in Paris for a year. Some might say she is practically a spinster. Some might say many things, Marcus replied evenly. Most of them would be fools. Pemberton chuckled. Protective, are we? How interesting. I wonder what your late wife would think of your sudden interest in the arts. Lady Hartwell is quite the accomplished painter, I hear. Marcus turned his full attention to the older man. What are you implying? Nothing at all, Your Grace. Simply making conversation. Though I do wonder why you chose tonight to make your first social appearance in months. Such a coincidence that Lady Hartwell returned to London just last week. Coincidences happen, Pemberton. Indeed they do. Tell me, did you know Lady Hartwell before her time in Paris? You seemed quite familiar with each other on the dance floor. Marcus's jaw tightened. If you have something to say, say it. My wife has an excellent memory for these things. She recalls a certain young lady who disappeared quite suddenly from London society about 10 years ago. Just after her 18th birthday. There were rumors, of course. There are always rumors when a young lady of good family vanishes without explanation. What kind of rumors? Oh, the usual sort. An unsuitable attachment. A secret engagement that was forbidden by her family. The kind of romance that ends in heartbreak rather than wedding bells. Marcus felt his hands clench into fists. And what does your wife remember about this supposed attachment? Very little, I am afraid. Only that the young man in question was quite devastated when the lady left town. Quite devastated indeed. Some say he never recovered from it. Pemberton smiled and moved away, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and his growing anger. So Eleanor's sudden departure 10 years ago had been noticed, had been discussed, had become the subject of society gossip. That explained a great deal about why she had stayed away so long. Marcus looked across the room to where Eleanor still stood, with her group of friends. As if she felt his gaze, she glanced up, and their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. For a moment, neither looked away. Then Eleanor turned her back to him, and gave her full attention to whatever story Lady Morrison was telling. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of polite conversation and careful observation. Marcus spoke to at least a dozen people, but he could not remember a single word that was said. All his attention was focused on Eleanor. He watched her dance with 3 different partners. He watched her laugh at jokes and smile at compliments. He watched her carefully avoid looking in his direction. When the evening finally ended, and guests began taking their leave, Marcus made sure to position himself near the entrance hall. He wanted to see Eleanor one more time before she disappeared into her carriage and out of his reach. She appeared with Lady Pemberton and several other ladies, all of them chattering about the evening's entertainment. Eleanor had retrieved her wrap, a beautiful silk shawl that matched her gown. She looked tired but still radiant. Lady Hartwell, Marcus stepped into her path as she headed for the door. Your Grace. She curtsied briefly. I trust you enjoyed the remainder of your evening. Very much, and you. It was lovely to see so many old friends again. They stood there in the midst of the departing crowd, polite strangers, making polite conversation. No one looking at them would guess they had once been lovers. No one would suspect the history that stretched between them like a bridge made of pain and longing. Will you be attending Lady Morrison's garden party next week? Marcus asked. I am not certain of my plans. I hope you will consider it. I understand she has quite an impressive rose garden. Eleanor's eyes flickered with something that might have been memory. I am sure it is lovely. Eleanor, he lowered his voice so only she could hear. We need to talk. No, we do not. Her reply was immediate and firm. We have nothing to say to each other, Your Grace. Nothing? After 10 years, you have nothing to say to the man who loved you? The man who loved me was young and foolish. That man no longer exists, does he not? Marcus stepped closer. Because I feel very much the same as I did at 25. Perhaps more so. Eleanor's eyes darted around the entrance hall, checking to see if anyone was listening to their conversation. Most of the other guests were too busy with their own farewells to pay attention. "You are being ridiculous," she said quietly. "We are different people now. I am different." "How? How are you different?" "I am older, wiser. I know better than to believe in impossible dreams." "What makes them impossible?" Eleanor stared at him as if he had asked her to explain why the sky was blue. "Everything, Marcus. Everything makes them impossible. Such as the fact that you are a duke and I am nobody. Such as the fact that 10 years have passed. Such as the fact that we both know how this story ends." "Do we?" "Because I remember the beginning very clearly, but the ending was never properly written." Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "The ending was written the day I left London. Some stories do not get the conclusions we might wish for, and some stories get second chances. Not this one." Eleanor moved toward the door, but Marcus caught her arm gently. "Eleanor, please. Just tell me why. Tell me why you left without a word. Tell me why you broke every promise you made to me. Give me that much." For a moment, Eleanor's carefully controlled mask slipped. Marcus saw the pain in her eyes, the regret, the longing that matched his own. But then she pulled the mask back into place. "Because I had to," she said simply, "and because it was the right thing to do." "For whom? For me?" "Because I can tell you with certainty that it was not right for me. For everyone." Eleanor pulled free of his grasp. "Good evening, Your Grace. Thank you again for the dance." She walked away then, joining Lady Pemberton and the other ladies as they made their way to their waiting carriages. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched Eleanor's carriage disappear into the London night. One dance. She had agreed to one dance, and now she was gone again. But this time, Marcus was not the heartbroken young man she had left before. This time, he had resources. This time, he had patience. This time, he would not let her slip away so easily. The next morning, Marcus was in his study before dawn, writing letters and making plans. If Eleanor thought one dance was all she owed him, she was about to learn how wrong she could be. He had waited 10 years for this moment, and he was not about to waste the opportunity. His first letter was to his secretary requesting a complete report on Eleanor's activities since her return to London. Where she was staying, who she was seeing, what her financial situation looked like. Information was power, and Marcus intended to use every advantage he could find. His second letter was to Lady Morrison, accepting her invitation to the garden party and offering to sponsor the refreshments. Lady Morrison was a notorious social climber who would be thrilled to have a duke take such an interest in her little gathering. More importantly, she would make sure that every eligible lady in London was invited, including Eleanor. His third letter was the most important. It was addressed to Eleanor herself. "My dear Lady Hartwell," he wrote, "I hope you will forgive the liberty of writing to you directly, but I find I cannot stop thinking about our conversation last evening. You mentioned that some stories do not get the conclusions we might wish for, but I believe you are wrong. The best stories are the ones that surprise us. The ones that take unexpected turns and lead us to places we never imagined. I would very much like to discuss this theory with you further. Would you do me the honor of taking tea with me tomorrow afternoon? I promise to behave with perfect propriety. Your devoted servant, Marcus." He sealed the letter and rang for his footman. Within the hour, it would be delivered to Eleanor's father's house in Mayfair. By evening he would have her answer. The answer, when it came, was brief and to the point. Your Grace, I thank you for your kind invitation, but I must decline. I hope you will understand. E. Hartwell. Marcus crumpled the note and threw it in the fire. Very well, if Eleanor wanted to be difficult, he could be patient. He had other ways of reaching her. Over the next few days, Marcus made himself visible in all the places where Eleanor might appear. He attended morning calls with ladies who were friends of her family. He showed up at the lending library where his secretary had discovered she liked to spend her afternoons. He even attended a charity auction for orphaned children, something he would normally avoid at all costs. Eleanor, for her part, seemed to be avoiding him with equal determination. Every time he arrived somewhere, she had just left. Every event he attended, she was mysteriously absent. It would have been frustrating if it had not been so familiar. Eleanor had always been stubborn when she set her mind to something. But Marcus was stubborn too. And he had something Eleanor did not have: unlimited resources and no pressing need to be anywhere else. He could afford to make chasing her his full-time occupation. The breakthrough came on Thursday afternoon. Marcus was leaving his club when he spotted a familiar figure in a dark blue walking dress coming out of a milliner's shop across the street. Eleanor was alone, without even a maid for company. This was his chance. Marcus crossed the street, timing his approach so that he would encounter her just as she reached the corner. Lady Hartwell, what a pleasant surprise. Eleanor looked up and saw him. For just a moment he saw pleasure flash across her face before she remembered to be aloof. Your Grace, out for an afternoon walk? Business meeting at my club. And you? Shopping for new bonnets? Eleanor gestured to the small package in her hands. Ribbon for a gown. Nothing very exciting. They stood on the busy street corner while pedestrians and carriages moved around them. Marcus was acutely aware that they were in public, that anyone might see them talking, but he was also aware that this was the first time in days that Eleanor had not immediately made excuses to leave his presence. Would you care to walk with me? He asked. Hyde Park is just a few streets away. The fresh air might be pleasant. Eleanor hesitated. I should return home. My father will be expecting me. Will he? It is barely 3 o'clock. Surely you have time for a short walk. I do not think it would be wise. Probably not, Marcus agreed. I have found that the wisest course is often the least interesting one. That almost made Eleanor smile. Almost. You have not changed, she said. Still trying to tempt me into poor decisions. Is walking in the park with an old friend truly such a poor decision? That depends on your definition of friend. Marcus offered her his arm. Why do we not walk and find out? Eleanor looked at his offered arm for a long moment. Marcus could practically see the debate happening in her mind. Finally she sighed and placed her hand on his sleeve. A short walk, she said. And then I really must return home. Of course. They walked toward Hyde Park in companionable silence. Marcus was intensely aware of Eleanor's hand on his arm, the way she matched his pace without thinking, the familiar scent of roses that seemed to follow her everywhere. It was like stepping back in time. You said your wife died 3 years ago, Eleanor said suddenly. Yes. Were you happy in your marriage? Marcus considered the question carefully. Catherine was a good woman. She was kind, intelligent, well suited to be a duchess. We were content. That is not the same as happy. No, it is not. They entered the park and found a path that led toward the Serpentine. The afternoon was mild and sunny, perfect for walking. Other couples and families were enjoying the weather, children playing while their parents watched from nearby benches. Did she know? Eleanor asked quietly. About us, I mean. No, I never told her about you. That was probably wise. Was it? I often wondered if she might have been happier with a husband who could love her completely. Eleanor's hand tightened slightly on his arm. You cannot blame yourself for that. You married her in good faith. Did I? Because if I am being honest, I married her because I needed a wife and she was available. Because my father was pressuring me to produce an heir. Because I thought that if I married someone else, I might finally be able to forget about the woman who left me. And did you? Forget? Marcus stopped walking and turned to face her. What do you think? Eleanor looked away, focusing on a group of children feeding swans at the edge of the lake. I think you are a romantic, Marcus. You always were. You probably built me up in your memory until I became something I never was. Did I? Because standing here with you now, I find that my memories were remarkably accurate. People change. I have changed. Have you? You still bite your lower lip when you are nervous. You still twist your gloves when you are thinking. You still smell like roses and sunshine. Eleanor's cheeks flushed pink. You should not say such things. Why? Because they are true? Because they are dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Eleanor started walking again, faster this time, to both of us. Marcus, what happened between us was a long time ago. We were children playing at being adults. I was 25, you were 18. Hardly children. Young then. Too young to understand what we were doing. I understood perfectly. I loved you. You loved me. We planned to marry. We planned many things that could never happen. Marcus caught her arm and made her stop walking. Why could they never happen? Your father liked me. My family approved of you. What was stopping us? Eleanor's green eyes filled with something that looked like pain. You know why? No, I do not. That is the problem, Eleanor. I have spent 10 years trying to understand why you left, and I still have no idea what I did wrong. You did nothing wrong. Then why? Because I was a coward, Eleanor said suddenly. Because I was 18 years old and terrified, and I took the easy way out. Because I convinced myself that leaving you was the kindest thing I could do. Marcus stared at her. This was more honesty than she had given him since she returned to London. Kindest for whom? For you. You were destined for great things, Marcus. Duke of Ashworth, Member of Parliament, advisor to the Prime Minister. I was just the daughter of a country gentleman with no fortune and no connections. I did not care about any of that. I know you did not. That was the problem. You would have thrown it all away for me, and I could not let you do that. That was my choice to make, was it? Because your father made it very clear that it was not a choice at all. Marcus went very still. What did my father say to you? Eleanor looked away again. It does not matter now. He is dead. And we are both different people. What did he say, Eleanor? He told me the truth. He told me that if you married me, you would lose everything. Your inheritance, your position, your future. He told me that you would come to resent me for it, and that I would spend my life knowing I had ruined yours. Marcus felt a cold rage building in his chest. His father had died 5 years ago, taking his secrets with him. But this explained everything. He threatened you. He did not need to threaten me. He simply showed me the truth of what my selfishness would cost you. It was not selfishness to love me, was it not? Because I loved you so much that I was willing to let you destroy your life for me. That sounds like selfishness to me. They had stopped in the middle of the path. Other walkers moved around them, probably wondering why they were standing there so intently focused on each other. So you left, Marcus said, without a word, without giving me a chance to choose. Yes, and you let me believe that you had stopped loving me. Yes. And for 10 years, you let me think I had done something wrong, that I had failed you somehow. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I am sorry. I thought it would be easier for you if you hated me. Easier? Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Eleanor, there was nothing easy about the last 10 years. Nothing at all. I know, and I am sorry. But Marcus, your father was right about one thing. You did become everything he wanted you to be. You are powerful and respected and wealthy beyond imagining. You have everything. Do I? Marcus stepped closer to her. Because standing here with you, I feel like I have been living half a life. You had a wife. You could have been happy. Could I? With a woman I married only because I could not have the one I really wanted. Eleanor wiped at her eyes with her gloved hand. We cannot change the past. No, but we can change the future. Can we? I am 28 years old, Marcus. A spinster who has spent the last 10 years hiding in Paris because she was too much of a coward to face what she had done. I am not the same girl you fell in love with. Are you not? Marcus reached out and touched her cheek gently. Because you look exactly the same to me. Eleanor closed her eyes at his touch. This is impossible, is it? I am a widower. You are unmarried. We are both free to make our own choices now. Are we? The same society that would have destroyed you for marrying beneath your station 10 years ago has not suddenly become more forgiving. I do not care what society thinks. You should. You have responsibilities, a dukedom to maintain, a reputation to protect. What good are any of those things without someone to share them with? Eleanor opened her eyes and looked at him. For a moment, Marcus saw the girl she had been 10 years ago, young and in love and full of hope for the future. I missed you, she whispered. Every day for 10 years, I missed you. Then stay. Do not run away again. I cannot. It is too complicated now. Why? What is complicated about two people who love each other being together? Eleanor pulled away from his touch. Because I am not the same person, Marcus. I have done things, made choices. I am not the innocent girl you remember. What are you talking about? Eleanor shook her head. I should not have said that. Please, just forget I mentioned it. Eleanor, what are you not telling me? But Eleanor was already walking away, moving quickly toward the park entrance. Marcus followed her, but she was practically running now. Eleanor, wait. I have to go. I should never have agreed to walk with you. Stop running from me. Eleanor did stop then, turning to face him with tears streaming down her cheeks. I am not running from you, Marcus. I am running from myself, from the mistakes I made, from the person I became after I left you. I do not care what mistakes you think you made. I do not care what you think you have done. All I care about is that you are here now. You would care. If you knew the truth, you would care very much. Then tell me the truth. Let me decide for myself. Eleanor stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. I cannot. I am sorry, Marcus. For everything. For leaving you, for hurting you, for not being brave enough to stay and face the consequences. But I cannot do this again. She turned and walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in Hyde Park, with more questions than answers. But this time, he did not let her disappear completely. This time, he followed at a distance, watching to see which direction she went, which house she entered. This time, he would not lose her so easily. That evening, Marcus sat in his study with a glass of brandy and a pile of reports from his secretary. The reports painted a picture of Eleanor's life that both intrigued and worried him. She had indeed spent most of the last 10 years in Paris, studying art and living quietly under an assumed name. She had sold several paintings under that name, enough to support herself modestly, but there were gaps in the timeline that his secretary had not been able to fill. More concerning were the hints about why she had returned to London so suddenly. Her father was ill. That much was true, but there were also suggestions of some kind of scandal in Paris, whispers about an attachment that had ended badly. Marcus set the reports aside and picked up his brandy. Eleanor's words from that afternoon echoed in his mind. "I have done things, made choices. I am not the innocent girl you remember." What had she done? What choices had she made that she thought would change his feelings for her? Because if she thought there was anything in her past that could make him love her less, she was very much mistaken. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." His butler entered with a silver tray. "Your Grace, this was delivered for you a few minutes ago." Marcus took the letter from the tray. His name was written on the front in Eleanor's familiar handwriting. "Thank you, Peterson, that will be all." The butler withdrew, closing the door behind him. Marcus opened the letter and read, "Dear Marcus, I owe you an explanation for my behavior today. Would you meet me tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock? I will be in the Rose Garden at Grosvenor Square. If you come, I will tell you everything. If you do not, I will understand and will not trouble you again. Eleanor." Marcus read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in his coat pocket. Tomorrow evening could not come soon enough. The next day passed with agonizing slowness. Marcus tried to focus on his business affairs, but his mind kept wandering to Eleanor and whatever revelation she planned to share with him. He changed clothes 3 times before settling on a dark coat and simple cravat. He wanted to look approachable, not intimidating. At 7:30, Marcus walked to Grosvenor Square. The public garden in the centre was open to residents of the surrounding houses, and the rose garden Eleanor had mentioned was tucked away in a quiet corner. It was the same garden where they had met secretly 10 years ago, when she was too young for public courtship and he was too impatient to wait for her father's formal permission. Eleanor was already there when he arrived, sitting on the same stone bench where they had shared their first kiss. She was wearing a simple white dress with a dark shawl, and her hair was pulled back severely from her face. She looked pale and nervous. "You came," she said as he approached. "Did you think I would not? I hoped you would, but I also hoped you might be wise enough to stay away." Marcus sat down beside her on the bench, careful to leave space between them. "I have never been accused of being particularly wise where you are concerned." Eleanor smiled at that, a real smile that reminded him of the girl she had been. "No, you have not." They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the scent of roses and the distant sounds of London evening traffic. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "I need to tell you about Paris, about what happened there." "All right." "When I left London, I was heartbroken and terrified and completely alone. I had no money of my own, no skills, no way to support myself. I was utterly dependent on my father's charity, and he made it clear that his charity came with conditions." Marcus said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "He sent me to live with his sister in Paris. Aunt Margaret was a spinster who had lived there for 20 years. She was supposed to watch over me, make sure I did not get into any more trouble. For the first year I barely left the house. I was too miserable to do anything but paint." "Your art?" "Yes. It was the only thing that made me feel alive." Aunt Margaret noticed, and she arranged for me to have lessons with a real artist, Jean-Claude Moreau. He was very talented and very charming. Marcus felt his chest tighten. "You loved him." "I thought I did." "He was everything you were not. Artistic, bohemian, completely unconcerned with social conventions. He made me feel sophisticated and worldly. He made me feel like I was not just some silly English girl who had made a mess of her life. Eleanor paused, picking at the fabric of her shawl with nervous fingers. "We lived together," she said quietly. "For 3 years, not married, of course. Jean-Claude did not believe in marriage. He said it was a bourgeois institution that destroyed true love." Marcus absorbed this information without speaking. He had suspected something like this, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a blow to the chest. "Were you happy?" he asked, finally. "I convinced myself I was." Jean-Claude was passionate about his art, about life, about everything. Being with him was like being caught in a whirlwind, exciting and terrifying and completely unpredictable. "What happened?" Eleanor's hands stilled. "I discovered I was with child." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had been prepared for many things, but not this. "When I told Jean-Claude, he was furious. He said I had trapped him, that I was trying to force him into respectability. He gave me money for a solution. When I refused, he threw me out." Marcus felt rage building in his chest, white-hot and consuming. If Jean-Claude Moreau had been within reach at that moment, Marcus would have killed him with his bare hands. "You kept the child," he said carefully. "I tried to. I moved to a small apartment in Montmartre, took in sewing to pay the rent, but I was already 4 months along, and the stress, the poor conditions, I lost the baby." Eleanor's voice broke on the last words. Marcus saw tears running down her cheeks, and his anger was replaced by overwhelming compassion. "Eleanor," he said softly, "I am so sorry. After that, I did not know what to do with myself. I had lost everything. The man I thought I loved, the child I wanted desperately, any hope of a respectable future. I was completely alone in a foreign country with no money and no prospects." "But you survived." "Barely. I spent 2 years in a very dark place, Marcus. I did things I am not proud of, just to keep body and soul together. I posed for artists who paid well and did not ask questions about my past. I took money from men who offered it in exchange for companionship." Marcus closed his eyes. He could picture Eleanor, alone and desperate, making choices that went against everything she had been raised to believe. It must have nearly killed her. "Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to start painting again. I developed some skill, found a few patrons who liked my work. I made enough money to live modestly and respectably. But the damage was done. I was no longer the innocent girl you had fallen in love with." "Is that what you think?" Marcus asked. "That I would care about any of that? How could you not care? I lived in sin with a man who was not my husband. I lost a child born out of wedlock. I sold myself to survive. How could any decent man want a woman with my history?" Marcus turned on the bench to face her fully. "Eleanor, look at me." She raised her tear-stained face to his. "Do you think I care about Jean-Claude Moreau? Do you think I care about the choices you made when you were desperate and alone? Do you think any of that changes how I feel about you? It should. Should it? Because all I can think about is how much you must have suffered, how terrified you must have been, how alone you felt. And all I want to do is hold you and promise that you will never have to go through anything like that again." Eleanor stared at him in amazement. You do not think less of me." "Think less of you, Eleanor? I think you are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known. You survived things that would have destroyed most people. You rebuilt your life from nothing. You learned to support yourself through your art. How could I think less of you for that? But I am not. I am not pure, not innocent." "Neither am I," Marcus said gently. "I was married for 7 years, Eleanor. I know what it means to share a bed with someone. I know about the physical side of love. Did you think that would shock me? I thought it would matter to you. The only thing that matters to me is that you are here now, that despite everything you have been through, you are still you, still the woman I fell in love with 10 years ago. Eleanor began to cry in earnest then, great sobbing tears that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Marcus moved closer to her on the bench and pulled her into his arms, holding her while she cried for everything she had lost, everything she had endured, everything she had given up. I missed you so much, she whispered against his chest. Every day I missed you, even when I thought I loved Jean-Claude. Even when I was trying to build a new life, there was always a part of me that belonged to you. I know, Marcus murmured into her hair. I know, because it was the same for me. They held each other in the rose garden as the sun set over London, two people who had found their way back to each other after a decade of separation and pain. What happens now? Eleanor asked eventually. Now? Now we stop wasting time. Now we stop letting other people make our choices for us. Now we decide what we want our future to look like. And what do you want it to look like? Marcus pulled back to look at her face. I want to marry you. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to grow old with you, and argue with you, and laugh with you, and love you, until the day I die. Marcus, I know what you are going to say, that it is impossible, that society will not accept it, that I have too much to lose. But Eleanor, I have already lost the most important thing once. I will not lose it again. What if people find out about my past? What if there is a scandal? Then there is a scandal. I have weathered scandals before. Not like this one. Eleanor, I am the Duke of Ashworth. I control more wealth and power than most people can imagine. I have the ear of the Prime Minister and seats in both houses of Parliament. Do you really think I cannot protect my own wife from gossip? Wife. The word hung in the air between them like a promise. You really want to marry me? After everything I have told you? I want to marry you because of everything you have told me. Because you trusted me enough to share your secrets. Because you have been tested by life and proven your strength. Because 10 years apart have only convinced me that I cannot live without you. Eleanor searched his eyes. And if I say yes, if I agree to marry you, what then? Then we go to your father and ask for his blessing. Then we announce our engagement and plan a wedding. Then we start the life we should have had 10 years ago. It will not be easy. The best things never are. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could practically see her weighing her options, considering all the ways their marriage could go wrong. Eleanor, he said softly, do you love me? Yes, she answered without hesitation. I have never stopped loving you. Then marry me. Take the risk. Trust that love is stronger than fear. Eleanor looked around the rose garden, taking in the familiar setting where their love had first bloomed. Then she looked back at Marcus, and he saw the exact moment when she made her decision. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Marcus kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise. It was their first kiss, the beginning of the life they should have had all along. When they finally broke apart, Eleanor smiled at him with genuine happiness for the first time since she had returned to London. So what happens next? She asked. Next, I walk you home and ask your father for permission to court you properly. Tomorrow, I send announcements to the papers. Next week, we begin planning our wedding. And tonight? Tonight, we celebrate the fact that sometimes, if you are very lucky and very patient, love gets a second chance. They walked back through the London streets hand in hand, talking and laughing like the young couple they had once been. By the time they reached Eleanor's father's house, they had decided on a small wedding in 6 weeks' time, just family and close friends. Nothing elaborate or showy. I want to marry you as quickly as possible, Marcus had explained. I have already waited 10 years. I do not intend to wait much longer. Eleanor's father was surprised but pleased by Marcus's request for his daughter's hand. He had always liked the young man who had courted Eleanor so earnestly 10 years ago, and he was relieved to see his daughter finally settled. I thought you had given up on marriage, my dear, he told Eleanor privately. I am so glad to see I was wrong. So am I, Papa, Eleanor replied. So am I. The engagement announcement appeared in the London papers 3 days later, causing quite a stir in society circles. The Duke of Ashworth, one of the most eligible widowers in England, was to marry Lady Eleanor Hartwell, the daughter of a country gentleman who had spent the last several years living quietly in France. There was gossip, of course. Speculation about why the Duke had chosen someone so far beneath his station. Whispers about Lady Hartwell's long absence from London society. Questions about whether there was some secret attachment from the past. But Marcus had been right about his ability to protect Eleanor from the worst of it. A word here, a strategic invitation there, a few carefully placed comments from influential friends, and the gossip died down to manageable levels. You see, he told Eleanor over tea one afternoon, I told you I could handle a little scandal. This is hardly a scandal, Eleanor replied. Wait until someone discovers the truth about my time in Paris. If they do, we will handle that too. Together. Eleanor smiled at him across the tea table. Together. I like the sound of that. The wedding took place on a beautiful morning in early June. Eleanor wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly. Marcus wore his dress uniform from his brief military service, looking every inch the Duke he was. The ceremony was held at the small church where Eleanor had been baptized, with only 30 guests in attendance. Eleanor's father walked her down the aisle, tears of joy streaming down his face. Marcus waited at the altar thinking that he had never seen anything more beautiful than his bride walking toward him in the morning sunlight. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Eleanor with all the passion and tenderness of a man who had waited 10 years for this moment. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I have always loved you. I will always love you. And I love you, she whispered back. Forever and always. The wedding breakfast was held at Marcus's London house. An elegant affair with French champagne and a cake decorated with sugar roses. Eleanor's new friends from London society mingled with Marcus's political associates and family members, everyone celebrating the obvious joy of the newlyweds. Have I told you how beautiful you look today? Marcus asked Eleanor as they waltzed together in his ballroom. Only about a dozen times. Then I am clearly not telling you often enough. Eleanor laughed, the sound bright and musical. I can hardly believe this is real, that we are really married, that we are really here. Believe it, Marcus said, spinning her gracefully across the polished floor. We are here. We are married, and we have the rest of our lives ahead of us. What do you think the rest of our lives will look like? Happy, Marcus said without hesitation. I think they will look very, very happy. As the afternoon wore on, and the guests began to take their leave, Marcus and Eleanor found themselves alone in the conservatory, stealing a few quiet moments together. Do you remember, Eleanor said, 10 years ago when we used to plan what our wedding would be like? I remember everything about 10 years ago. We were going to have a huge ceremony with hundreds of guests. I was going to wear a dress with a 10-foot train. You were going to hire an orchestra. And yet today was perfect exactly as it was. Yes, Eleanor agreed. It was perfect. Marcus took her hands in his, marveling at the simple gold band he had placed on her finger just hours earlier. Eleanor, I need you to know something. What? I do not regret the time we lost. I know that sounds strange, but I think we needed those 10 years. We needed to grow up, to learn who we were apart from each other. We needed to understand what we were willing to sacrifice for love. Eleanor considered this. I think you may be right. 10 years ago, I was too young to be a duchess, too naive to handle the pressures that would have come with marrying you. And I was too young to fight for what I wanted, too willing to let other people make my decisions. But now I know exactly what I want, and I am old enough and strong enough to keep it. Eleanor smiled and leaned up to kiss him. I love this older, wiser version of you. Do you? Because I was rather fond of the young, romantic version of myself. Oh, he is still there. I can see him when you look at me. But now he is tempered with experience and patience and determination. It is a very attractive combination. Marcus kissed her again, longer and deeper this time. Mrs. Ashworth, he murmured against her lips. I like the sound of that. So do I, Eleanor replied. So do I. That evening, as they travelled to Marcus's country estate for their honeymoon, Eleanor reflected on the strange journey that had brought them back to each other. 10 years of separation, heartbreak and hard-learned lessons had led them to this moment. They were not the same people who had fallen in love in a rose garden so long ago. They were older, wiser, more cautious with their hearts. But they were also more certain, more committed, more willing to fight for their love.
What are you thinking about?
Marcus asked from beside her in the carriage. About how strange life is, how we can think we know exactly where we are headed, only to find ourselves somewhere completely different. Regrets? None, Eleanor said firmly. Not a single one. Everything that happened, good and bad, led us back to each other. How can I regret that? Marcus took her hand and brought it to his lips. I waited 10 years for you, Eleanor. 10 years, 3 months, and 16 days. But if I had to, I would wait 10 more. Well, it is a good thing you do not have to. Indeed it is. They arrived at Ashworth Manor just as the sun was setting over the rolling countryside. The house was lit with candles in every window, and the staff had lined up to welcome their new duchess. Welcome home, Your Grace, the housekeeper said with a deep curtsy. Home. The word settled into Eleanor's heart, like a missing piece of a puzzle, clicking into place. This was her home now. This beautiful house, this kind man beside her, this life they would build together. That night, as they lay in each other's arms in the master bedroom that had been Marcus's alone for so many years, Eleanor marveled at how right everything felt. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. And I love you, Marcus replied, his arms tightening around her. Forever and always. Forever and always, Eleanor agreed. Outside their window, the roses that Eleanor had helped plant 10 years ago during her brief courtship bloomed in wild profusion, filling the night air with their sweet perfume. It was as if the garden itself was celebrating their return to each other. 5 years later, Eleanor stood in that same rose garden, watching her 3-year-old daughter chase butterflies among the flowers. Little Catherine had Marcus's dark hair and Eleanor's green eyes, and she had her father completely wrapped around her tiny finger. Mama, look, Catherine called, pointing to a particularly large butterfly that had landed on a pink rose. Pretty, very pretty, darling, Eleanor called back. But be gentle. We do not want to frighten it away. Marcus appeared beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. Where did she get such boundless energy? From her father. I suspect you were the one who insisted on teaching her to run before she could properly walk. I was not going to have a daughter who could not keep up with me on my morning walks. Eleanor laughed. And now she can outrun both of us. They watched their daughter with the contentment of parents who had waited a long time for the family they now treasured. Catherine had been born 2 years after their wedding, a healthy, happy baby who had completed their little circle of love. "Do you ever think about Jean-Claude's child?" Marcus asked quietly. It was not the first time he had asked this question, and Eleanor knew it came from a place of love and concern, not jealousy. Sometimes, Eleanor admitted, "I wonder what he or she would have been like. But I have learned to think of that baby as the child who made Catherine possible. If I had not lost the first one, I would never have had the second one." Marcus kissed the top of her head. "You have such a gift for finding meaning in pain. I learned it from you. You taught me that love can survive anything if it is strong enough." "Did I? I thought you taught me that." Catherine came running toward them, her small hands cupped carefully in front of her. "Mama, Papa, look what I found." She opened her hands to reveal a caterpillar, fuzzy and green and clearly unimpressed by its capture. "Oh my," Eleanor said seriously, "that is quite a find, but I think this little fellow would prefer to stay in the garden where he can find his dinner. Can we keep him?" "I do not think he would be very happy living in the house," Marcus explained, "but we can visit him every day and see how he is growing." Catherine considered this gravely, then carefully placed the caterpillar back on a nearby leaf. "Bye-bye, little bug. We will come see you tomorrow." Eleanor and Marcus exchanged amused glances over their daughter's head. They had both agreed that Catherine would grow up knowing she was loved, but also understanding that love sometimes meant letting go. That evening, after Catherine had been tucked into bed with her favorite story about a princess who rescued herself, Eleanor and Marcus sat in the library sharing brandy and comfortable silence. "I received a letter from Lady Morrison today," Eleanor said. "She is planning another garden party next month and specifically requested that we attend." "The same Lady Morrison who gave the party where we had our first dance in 10 years? "The very same. I think she considers herself responsible for our romantic reunion." Marcus chuckled. "She probably does, and she is not entirely wrong. If she had not invited us both to that ball, we would have found each other eventually," Eleanor said with certainty. "Some things are meant to be." "Are they? Even after 10 years of separation?" "Especially after 10 years of separation. Anyone can fall in love when everything is easy. It takes something special to find your way back to each other after life has tested you." Marcus set down his brandy glass and moved to sit beside Eleanor on the sofa. "Mrs. Ashworth, you are a very wise woman. I had a very good teacher." "Did you? Who was that?" "Time," Eleanor said simply. "Time taught me that the best things in life are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth risking everything for." Marcus kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of the deep contentment that came from a love that had been tested and proven true. "I have a confession to make," he said against her lips. "Oh? What sort of confession?" "I am glad you left 10 years ago." Eleanor pulled back to look at him in surprise. "You are?" "Yes. Because if you had not left, we would have married when we were too young to really appreciate what we had. We would have taken each other for granted. We might have grown apart instead of growing together." Eleanor considered this. "And now I wake up every morning grateful that you chose to come back, that you chose to stay, that you chose to build a life with me despite everything that tried to keep us apart." "It was not really a choice," Eleanor said. "Loving you has never been a choice. It is just who I am. Even when you thought you loved Jean-Claude, even then, there was always a part of my heart that belonged to you, a part that was just waiting for you to claim it again." Marcus traced the line of her cheek with his finger. "And I did claim it, along with all the rest of you." "Yes, you did, completely and utterly, and forever." They made love that night with the passion of newlyweds and the tenderness of an old married couple. It was a combination that Eleanor had never experienced with anyone else, this perfect blend of desire and deep affection. Afterward, as they lay entwined in their marriage bed, Eleanor thought about the young woman she had been 10 years ago. That girl had been so afraid of taking risks, so convinced that love was not worth the potential cost. She had run away from the best thing in her life because she thought she was protecting it. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked sleepily. "About courage, about how it comes in different forms." "Explain." 10 years ago, I thought courage meant sacrificing my own happiness for your good. Now I know that real courage means fighting for happiness, even when the odds are against you. And which kind of courage do you prefer? Eleanor smiled in the darkness. "The kind that led me back to you." "Good answer. I have become quite wise in my old age." "You are 28, Eleanor. Hardly ancient. 28 and married to the most wonderful man in England. I consider myself very fortunate." "Only England? What about Scotland? Or Wales?" Eleanor laughed. "Very well. The most wonderful man in all of Britain. Better, though I was hoping for all of Europe." "Do not push your luck, your grace." Marcus kissed her forehead. "I love you, Eleanor. More today than yesterday, but not as much as I will tomorrow." That is quite poetic for a man who claims to have no romantic sensibilities. "You inspire me to poetry." "Do I? How marvelous. Perhaps you should write some down." "Perhaps I should." "Ode to my wife's beautiful eyes." "Sonnet for the woman who made me believe in second chances." Eleanor curled closer to him. "I like that second one. Do you?" "I shall have to work on it." "But not tonight." "Tonight. Just hold me." "Always," Marcus promised. "For as long as you will let me." "Forever." "Then, forever." And as they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, the roses outside their window released their sweet perfume into the night air, as if the garden itself was blessing their love story. It had been a long journey back to each other, full of heartbreak and hard lessons, and moments when all seemed lost. But they had found their way home at last. Some love stories end with the first kiss, others end with the wedding. But the best love stories, the ones worth telling, never really end at all. They just keep growing deeper and stronger with each passing day. Eleanor had agreed to one dance 10 years after she broke his heart. Marcus had waited all that time for this exact moment. And in the end, that single dance had led them back to forever. The Duke of Ashworth had gotten his fairy tale ending after all. And this time, nothing and no one would take it away from him.